There it is. Good. So if you want to have a thought-provoking conversation, you should always invite a heretic, and that's why I'm here. So the title is "It's the Pattern That Connects Insights from a Recovering Systems Thinker," which was probably better than titling it "Systems Thinking Bah Humbug." And by the time I finish this, you'll probably understand why the title is. So we have a problem. I'm sitting at the kitchen table in the morning having a pleasant breakfast, and my wife yells down from upstairs, "Are you finally going to clean up that unsightly growth beneath the bird feeder? Because I'm getting tired of looking at it." And when that happens, all of a sudden, this whole set of relationships flashes before my eyes in terms of how I got myself into this situation. I deal with a lot of frustration on an ongoing basis, and having a pleasant breakfast helps me deal with those frustrations throughout the day. And as of late, there have been a number of birds outside on the railing, which has actually increased my pleasant breakfast. And after this happens for several days, I say, "Self, maybe you should install a bird feeder." So I install a bird feeder because I think it will increase birds at the feeder, increasing the birds outside and improve my pleasant breakfast. And it does, in fact, do that. And additionally, it increases the attractiveness of the garden, attracting more birds, which adds to my pleasant breakfast. And everything is going just marvelously, though all of a sudden I realized that, have you seen the price of bird seed these days? So the need to buy bird seed actually adds to my frustration. And then the birds at the feeder create spillage, which increases the need to buy bird seed, which adds to my frustration. And the bird feeder attracts squirrels, the universal eating machine, which decreases the birds at the feeder, increasing the need to buy bird seed, increasing spillage, which more bird seed and more frustration. And additionally, the spillage promotes that unsightly growth that my wife is complaining about, which increases my frustration. And the spillage attracts rodents that I have to figure out how to deal with. And as of late, the birds are pooping all over the railing, and I have to figure out how to clean that up. So, my question to you is, what's the real problem? And we'll leave that there at the moment, and we'll come back to this in a bit. I typically unfold this presentation piece by piece, though every time I do, it ends up not being in the order that I want to talk about it. So it's sort of it's all here, and I'm going to talk about bits and pieces, but not all of it. Before I'm done, I will post a link to this so that you can look at the other parts that might be of interest at as you wish. So this journey for me started in 1975 when in a programming course the professor said we're going to read Stafford Beer's Platform for Change, and it was like all of the cosmic tumblers lined up, and my whole view of the world changed, and I never looked back. Not that I recommend that you read this book. That I became a um, sort of presenting wanting people to embrace the systems paradigm was unbelievable, to the point where people used to say, "What do you do?" And as I began to tell them, you could see their eyes glaze over as they were asking themselves, "Why did I ask, and how do I get him to stop?" So I persisted, and there was always a problem about where to start to develop models. I started developing models on an IBM 360 with punch cards in GPSS, which is only slightly more entertaining than watching paint dry. Though I persisted in developing quantitative models and qualitative models, and as I studied and developed and attempting to develop my skill in the arena of system dynamics, I learned that there were literally thousands of models and methods that claim to embrace the systems paradigm. And if you have 660 free euros, you can buy the latest copy of the encyclopedia. So I'm confused about, I think that system dynamics is absolutely fabulous, and systems thinking is just not a not very grown up version of system dynamics. So why do we need all of these different models and methods? And then I run across Michael C. Jackson's Systems Thinking Creative Holism for Managers. And I'm not going to, if you go to this model, you can unfold it step by step by step. And I talk about the pieces, but essentially he talks about, if you look at a model being something between simple and complex, being that you could conceive of designing it and building it, or you could conceive of simply trying to understand it. And then you think about the participants and the extent to which they are aligned in terms of their beliefs and goals and objectives. Some people are very aligned, some people can be somewhat aligned, and some people will never agree on anything. And within each of these contexts, there are a variety of different approaches for dealing with situations which have typically demonstrated that they are likely to provide improvement in the situation if you follow the methods. So this is all well and good. I now have an understanding as to why it is that there are lots of different approaches to dealing with situations that you're wrestling with. And that lasted for about a day until I became terribly, terribly depressed because I said to myself, self, you've been wrestling with trying to become well versed in system dynamics for years. And now you understand you have to learn dozens of different approaches, and you're just not that smart. So, what are you going to do? Well, after pondering it for a while, I realized that all of the various models and methods are just about understanding relationships and their implications. They go about it in different ways, though each one of them is seeking to understand relationships and their implications. And I finally asked myself this really unbelievable question, which was, how do I go about creating a model? And I recall that back in the early days, when I was struggling with that, I would develop models from the inside out, top down, bottom up, backwards to the beginning. Though at this point, I realized that over the years, I had actually developed an approach to developing a model that seemed to work on an ongoing basis, and I never realized that I did it. I guess it was self-preservation over time, but I sort of distilled it down into 6 steps. I begin with a situation or topic that I want to understand. I ask, what influences this? Ask, what does this influence? And I continually ask questions 2 and 3 repeatedly until I run out of answers. And then I explain the model to somebody else, and I try and not be an idiot and argue with them about their feedback because I need to seek to understand why it's that perspective. So there's an old saying that says, because you understand one, you think you understand two, because 1 and 1 is 2. But first, you have to understand and. And for me, and is just the approach that enables us to synthesize a contextual understanding of anything. I'm at a point where uh, there are no things in the world. There are just bundles of relationships to which we've affixed labels as a matter of convenience. If I want to describe the relationship between you and your car, I'm interested in the relationship, but I don't have to describe the myriad of relationships that make up you or the ones that make up the car. If I'm talking about the car to someone who has never seen a car, well, then maybe I have to break it down to some extent. But we're interested in what happens in terms of the relationships between these bundles of relationships. So at that about the same time that this happened, I I realized that I had spent years developing models and inflicting them on other people because I never gave them a way to understand them. I would send it to people because I wanted to impress them with how smart I was, not realizing that they didn't give a damn. And if they sent back a comment after some period of time, it might be something like, "Oh, well, that's nice." And what they really wanted to say is, "Why'd you send this to me?" So I made this connection between a model and a play. If you go to a play and you sit there and you watch the relationships unfold between the actors from one act to another, At the end of the play, if it's relatively well done, you leave and you take the story with you because it's the pattern that connects. What systems thinkers have done forever is akin to having the playwright walk up to you, hand you the script. You haven't seen the play, but they just give you the script, and 5 minutes later say, "What do you think?" There's no way that you can understand that piece of work in that form in that time frame. And it was at that point I stopped being a systems thinker and became a storyteller of relationships and their implications. And the best way to actually communicate is something called Helping People Trip Over the Truth, which came from the Heath Brothers Moments book. You take a clear insight compressed in time, delivered in a manner that enables the audience to discover it. So the audience has an aha moment. Along the way, also a realization that there's only three structures. There's feedback independent growth or decline. There's a reinforcing structure, and there's a goal seeking balancing structure. And that's it. There's nothing else. It doesn't matter how complex or complicated the relationship model is you develop. It's just a group of these. And this is a stock and flow simulation view of them. You could also have a qualitative view of them, and this is the Kumu model or the template that I use to start with developing all of my relationship models. And there are 5 videos here that describe this in intricate detail as to why I set it up this way and why I continue to use it. So that's there. And at the same time, when that happened, realizing that there are only 3 structures, then all of a sudden the archetypes made far more sense in that the archetypes, which Sengi talks about, and the comment about Sengi's book, and I read Sengi's book in 1990 when it first came out, and it was marvelous. Though I read it once a year for 5 years, and then I thought I had it, and then I'm not sure I still understand all of it, but it's a marvelous piece of work. So if I start out and I'm trying to do something, I can either attempt to fix a problem or I can promote growth. And all of the rest of these are simply typical evolutions of the structure, so that I start out to fix a problem, things get better, and then they get worse. And then they get worse because the underlying cause is not being addressed. And then typically it evolves into an addiction structure. And each, when you go to this particular model, which was done in Insight Maker, each one of these entities, if you click on it, it will take you to another Insight Maker model, which is a qualitative version and a simulation version that will unfold as a story and allow you to play with the relationships to better understand them if that's what you're interested in. But this is another piece that takes far too long to present here. How am I doing on time? Am I almost out? Nobody's listening. Okay. So at one point in time, I developed this course called the Certified Systems Thinker Program and thought I was extremely presumptuous, and I probably was. And the first people that I developed on Udemy, and the people that went through it were gave me amazing reviews of the program, something that, even though it was something you could complete in a weekend if you were a little intent. And then a few people went through it and they said, okay, this is marvelous. Now, how do I sell systems thinking to my organization? And I pretty much had a meltdown because I realized that they missed it completely. So I pondered their question for a couple weeks and came up with several perspectives or several thoughts as to why you can't sell systems thinking to the organization. And there's a video here that you can watch that will explain it in more detail that I'm going to do at the moment. Though The only people that I've ever met that aren't systems thinkers are dead people and people who are catatonic. If you wake up in the morning and you realize that you're hungry, you get up, you take a shower, you get dressed, you go to the kitchen, you eat breakfast, and you're not hungry anymore. You just satisfied a goal-seeking structure. It's just that you may never have been provided with an opportunity to realize what it is that you're doing. And going to someone and telling them that they need to learn systems thinking to better understand how to deal with their problems is akin to me walking up to you and saying you're stupid and then expecting you to listen to everything else I have to say after that. We can help people realize what they already understand if we approach it appropriately. So the first rule of Fight Club is not to talk about Fight Club, and I never talk to people about systems thinking. Well, except to people that already been drinking the Kool-Aid for a long time. So if I sit down with someone who's wrestling with the problem, I'm not there to help. I'm there to allow them to help me understand their problem. And as they're explaining what they're wrestling with, I'll take notes. Though my notes look like a model, but I've never said anything about modeling. And after a few minutes, I begin to ask them questions about the notes, about what they've told me to this point. And it's really amazing that within 15 minutes, they're looking at my notes and they're saying, well, you really ought to add this piece and you should connect this to this and this connects over there. And for most people, modeling is worse than a root canal, though if you try to simply get them to do modeling, though you can use a stealth approach and have them become acquainted with it. And it works marvelously. So my point is that, what's the point? The point is it's all about relationships and their implications. And when you understand, everything makes sense. Mostly pretty stupid, but it makes sense if you follow the relationships and understand why it is that things are working the way they are. Now, I just posted a bunch of links in the chat for the video. I think I did. If they post, they don't post. Won't it post? Oh, won't post because it's too long. Sorry. All right, I posted part of them. And now I'll post the other part. So I'm posting the link to this presentation. If you go to the presentation, when you mouse over it, there are little blue links underneath things. And the blue links take you to models and videos and presentations. And what I posted in the chat is a link to this presentation, which is a Kumu model. The musings that I've been doing in Substack for the past 6 months. I write usually a couple of them a week, but they're different thoughts about relationships and their implications, along with a link to my YouTube channel, my email, and a link to my calendar if you would like to set up a time and chat about relationships and their implications. I do that on an ongoing basis. So I think I'm done.
Thank you very much, Guinea.